My name is Carmen Byce. I'm a doctoral candidate at Texas A&M University. And my co-presenter is Dr. Kim Dooley, who most people probably know, but she's a professor in the ALIC department at Texas A&M University. And so today we wanted to share a few tools that we've used for participatory rural appraisal, and also hear from others in the room that maybe have used PRA or have questions about PRA. And then as time allows, and given that we're at a distance, we will demonstrate a couple of PRA techniques in this virtual setting. So just as a heads up, a few things you'll need access to this morning are the chat function and the raised hand function. We'll be using those. And then later in the session, we'll be using an online application. So it might be best if you have your smartphone kind of handy to do a poll online. If not, you can do it on your computer, but I find it works really well if you have your smartphone.
Okay, thank you. And my computer is still making a terrible noise in the background, but I think it's going to push through.
Well, hopefully it won't be distracting to you, but we can't hear it anymore. So I think that'll be a little bit better.
Okay, perfect. And thanks everybody for hanging in there. So like I said, we'll start with a bit of an advanced organizer. And we really want to spend most of the time looking at the application of PRA and practicing a few techniques. Of course, it took us some time to re-envision what the practical activities would look like since we're not in person, but we'll do what we can in a virtual setting, which I think is actually a good demonstration for how we're having to do a lot of our work these days from a distance. So we wanted to start by asking, looking at these two pictures, which do you think represents the best approach to determine community needs? Any thoughts from participants?
Sure, Dr. Byce. When I look at these two pictures, I think that it depends on the community that you're working with, which could be better. So, if one community has access to internet and technology, the online survey could work, whereas with another community, being in person in a group could be best.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other thoughts?
This isn't a very definitive answer, but I would say I think a combination of the two of those is really important. And they can be complementary, like Dr. Edgar said.
Yeah, thank you for both of those. Exactly. So it depends a lot on depends completely on the situation and the information we have access to, the purpose of the needs assessment, and really, oftentimes, it's best that we combine both kind of a review through survey data, secondary data, but also some in-person, on-the-ground learning with the community members. And so it's that in the community assessment and techniques that we want to focus on today. Specifically looking at PRA, Participatory Rural Appraisal. So PRA actually describes a whole suite of tools that you might draw from, and it's related to rapid rural appraisal, which you may also be familiar with, but PRA really emphasizes that community members are the experts about their needs, about how programs are or aren't working for them personally or as a community. And so PRA techniques are really focused on putting experts at the center, or community members at the center of the discussion, and even more than that, empowering them to lead the discussions and the decision making. So it really legitimizes local knowledge and works to empower the community. It also tends to be very bottom up, which means it requires good communication and mutual respect between the researcher and the practitioner and the community. And I know oftentimes, if we're working with communities where we don't have the privilege to live and work in the community all of the time, one thing that I found to be very helpful is making sure we have those strong local partnerships that do have that longer term relationship with the community and that mutual respect. And I'll share an example of how I worked kind of in that setup in Myanmar. And then, when you look at the results of some of the PRA techniques, you might not think that there's much kind of process to it, but actually PRA done correctly is systematic, although it's semi-structured, and it tends to be qualitative in nature. But still, like rapid rural appraisal, it tends to be time and cost effective compared to some lengthier needs or evaluation studies, or as we said before, kind of to complement those lengthier studies. And then very important, these techniques are adaptable. So the way that we'll facilitate them today, we will use a lot of words and graphics and computers, but we'll also talk about how these techniques can be used in a community with limited literacy and with individuals that speak different languages. So they're very adaptable. So looking at the application of PRA techniques in international ag and extension education, we can apply them in many ways. First, and probably most often cited in literature, is the use of these techniques to prioritize community needs. And it's really for the community to discuss and prioritize needs. Number two, PRA techniques help us identify those formal and informal power dynamics. And oftentimes what I found, these techniques help communities identify those power dynamics and articulate those power dynamics, and sometimes even identify inequalities that maybe hadn't been clearly articulated within the community previously. I really like the application of PRA for program evaluation and that real participatory evaluation and learning approach that we strive for in our programs. And so we'll look at ways that it can be used for evaluation. And these tools are really great at helping us understand both the kind of biological agricultural systems and challenges, as well as the social systems. So we know that agricultural challenges our partners and clients face don't occur in a vacuum. They occur within social systems. And so these mapping techniques and other PRA techniques allow us to see how those biological, agricultural, technical issues and social systems interact. And then they have practical applications. So we've used PRA techniques even to better understand when our participants available for training and have the most interest in training. So planning the timing and sequencing of our extension activities. And then very importantly, to build local capacity for program design and evaluation. So at this point also, feel free to use the comment section if you've used PRA techniques in your work in ways other than kind of the few that are sampled here. So I mentioned that PRA is really a suite of tools. Dr. Dooley and I first had about 6 listed, and then that wasn't enough to cover the full range. And so now we have 14 listed. We can't cover them all today, but these are all really viable options for implementing PRA into your research, community assessments, and evaluations, and in your program design. And at the end of the presentation, I will share a link to a Google Drive for this presentation, and you'll see each of these titles are actually hyperlinked to resources. And most are not scholarly journal publications. These are actually manuals for practitioners in the field. So real step-by-step guides on how to, how these tools are used and how to implement the tools, as well as great examples from different international contexts of how they've been used. But most of these are very visual tools. They are tools that engage the community interactively, that encourage consensus building in some ways, and then in other ways, like Empowerment Matrix, we'll see where we can kind of compare and contrast priorities by the different participant groups. Today, we'll talk about maybe 4 of these specifically. So you'll see there's a lot more that we won't touch on today. So the case studies Dr. Dooley and I wanted to focus on, and I think Dr. Dooley's still not yet here, but our gender role mapping in Afghanistan. We'll look at work that I've done in Myanmar using seasonal calendars and the empowerment matrix. And then Dr. Dooley will share examples from Timor-Leste, which were implementation of Transect walk and focus group. So those of y'all that joined the professional development session in December, just before the holiday break, Ms. Margaret Orwig and I presented a little bit on gender mapping in the wheat value system of Afghanistan. And the picture you see here is a visual map that was developed by subject matter experts. So these were business leaders and extension agents, mapping out the entire value system of Afghanistan from inputs all the way to consumption, and identifying women's contributions and roles, as well as barriers. And this audience happened to be fairly educated, on average, at least high school educated, and so we were able to use words and diagrams and things like that. But you can also use this sort of mapping using symbols and objects in the community as well. And so we use this as a way to very preliminarily understand where were women engaged in the wheat value system of Afghanistan, and also what were some of the perceived barriers. We're actually taking this now to the village level and using drawings and things to map out roles at the farm level, and where men and women, boys and girls, paid and unpaid, contribute to household wheat production. And so so far it's been very well received with an Afghan audience, even Afghan audience with limited literacy. I'll share one more example, and then we'll do a practice activity together. So in 2019, I had the opportunity to work in Myanmar through a Fulbright specialist assignment. And the Ministry of Agriculture had requested support to help agricultural extensionists and researchers better engage with the communities to identify agricultural needs, and also to, in a participatory way, evaluate the impacts of both ministry programs and externally funded agricultural development programs. And so I worked with extension agents and researchers on many skills, but focused quite a bit on participatory rural appraisal. And the training culminated in visits to farming villages outside of Naypyidaw in southern Myanmar for the participants to apply what they had learned, partnering with a local extension agent there. So the purpose was to identify the perceived needs from the farming communities specific to rice production, because this was a rice producing area of Myanmar. So through focus group discussions and one-on-one interviews, the extensionists and researchers identified a whole host of kind of challenges that the community had expressed, as well as recommendations for further programming, such as training and access to credit, and a whole range of recommendations for ministry investments in the agriculture sector. And so I think many of us are probably familiar with focus group discussions and interviews, but this group took it further to better understand those issues and to help the community prioritize the issues that they were presenting to the ministry. So we use two tools, well, many tools, but the two I'll focus on are the seasonal calendar and the priority matrix. So a seasonal calendar, that's this picture here. So a seasonal calendar maps agricultural challenges or opportunities. It can also be used to map, say, availability of food, so that you have a seasonal food security map. It's used in many ways. In this case, the participants worked with the community to map out the agricultural issues that they had described. When were they most prevalent and most severe throughout the year? And so those were issues such as flooding, labor shortages, and specific pest issues. And so I'll show, let's see, I'll show how the result of that was mapped later. So the community worked on this kind of just in a gravel parking area, using colored Post-it notes to represent severe to less severe in terms of these issues throughout the year. And then this is what the extension agents put together when we were back in an office setting. And so you can see the pink or red Post-it notes are when that's the most severe challenge in the year. And so it's interesting, you can see, droughts in certain part of the year and then flooding in other parts of the year. And this can be really important so that the ministry and program implementers are preparing training, extension packages, and other support at appropriate times of the year, because it is very regionally specific. And then it also combines. Thanks again, everyone. Okay, so I'm not sure where I dropped off, but this shows kind of the cleaned up results of the community's work to map their challenges along the months of the year. And again, this is also, I've used this successfully to map food shortages, to look at food security issues throughout the year as well. So the seasonal calendar approach can be used in many different ways. The other thing we worked on with the community, and again, I say we, I was there in a support role by this point, and the local extension agents and researchers were really engaging with the community. So we also, through the focus group and interviews, participants or community members had listed kind of requests or priorities that they would like communicated to the Department of Agriculture and the Ministry of Agriculture. And so those are listed down here, but it was access to better quality seed, seasonal training, more modern machinery, and so on. And so this list was developed through the focus group and interview discussion, but there was still need to understand which were considered priority by the community. And so the empowerment matrix was used, and each community member was given stickers to be able to note which issue they found to be most important to them. And you can see then how you can determine not just a ranking, but also see the difference in priority setting. I will say, though, we didn't just use this tool to determine priorities that were communicated to the ministry. We triangulated the results of this, the focus group discussions and interviews, as well as one other prioritization exercise to really understand the differences in priority. And also we worked with groups that were segregated by men and women, so that we understood how the priorities of men and women differed as well, to ensure women as the minority generally in the community, that their voices were heard and clearly communicated to the ministry as priorities. So I'll pause there just in case there's any questions about the Afghanistan or the Myanmar examples, and then we'll practice with a group activity. Okay. And Dr. Bush, if there are comments in the chat function, I can't easily monitor those at the moment. So if you wouldn't mind flagging those for me.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. There's nothing as of recent.
Okay, thank you. Well, hopefully there will be soon, because I want to demonstrate the best we can in a virtual setting how you might do a priority matrix in the community. So when I've done these in communities, they were, again, usually to identify perceived needs for a farming community, to prioritize requests for information, training, or resources that the community had, or as participatory evaluation tool. But for the sake of this group, we wanted to choose a topic that might speak to you personally. So we're going to use the priority matrix to determine topics that members see as important topics for future AIA-EE professional development. So what would you want to learn or hear about in future AIA-EE professional development sessions? And so I'd like to ask if each participant could just quickly think 1, 2, 3, 4, however many quick topics you can think of, and share those in the comment section. Okay, thank you, Dr. Roberts. Connecting classrooms to international opportunities. And I'm going to go ahead and type some of these in as they come up.
You want me to keep reading them to you?
Yes, please.
Okay. So innovative evaluation designs, mixed methods data analysis, qualitative evaluation, adapting extension programming to changing climatic conditions, developing international partners,
Okay, that may be, just for the sake of demonstration, that may be as many as we work with today. But thank you, everybody, for those ideas. And if you have an idea and you didn't get it,
these.
okay, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Even if yours didn't make it to this list of 6 for demonstration, I think the committee would be interested in hearing other ideas too. So you can keep sending those in. Okay. Okay, so if we had done this in a community, we probably would have gathered that feedback through focus groups or interviews and had this really long list of topics, either needs or requests for information or resources. And so there are tools. If you go back to the menu of tools, this empowerment matrix can help you narrow that list down to a more manageable number to work with this priority matrix. So I did want to highlight that. If you had a list of 20, that'd probably be too many to work with reasonably. And so you might want to go through more of a nominal grouping technique, which is demonstrated at this link, before you got to the priority matrix. So what the priority matrix allows us to do is to ask community members to do pairwise ranking, because that's often a more manageable question than taking a long list of proposed priorities and ranking them. So, and I know this even in my mind, comparing 1 to 2 is much easier than trying to rank that long list. And so what we do at this point is we ask the community members, which do you feel is of greater importance to your community? Is it 1 or 2? And this is where you sound like an eye doctor at some point, those of y'all that go to the eye doctor frequently. So which is more important to your community? Is it connecting classes to international opportunities? Or is it number 2, innovative evaluation design? So we're going to walk through a couple of these now as a group. And I'll ask you those questions and ask that you vote by raising your hand using the raised hand function. And Dr. Bush, if you don't mind helping me count those. So again, as a professional or student, those that are joining, which professional development opportunity is of greater priority to you? Is it 1, connecting classes to international opportunities? Or is it 2, innovative evaluation design? So please raise your hand if 1 is of higher priority to you. Okay, thank you. And raise your hand if 2, innovative evaluation design is of higher priority. Okay, and I think I saw more hands jump up for 2. Is that what you saw, Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then we would continue. So now we're comparing suggestion 1 to suggestion 3. So please raise your hand if connecting classes to international opportunities is more of higher priority to you than mixed methods analysis. So hands for 1. Okay, thank you. And hands for 3, mixed method analysis. Was that 3, Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now we'll be comparing suggestion 2 and suggestion 3. So suggestion 2 is innovative evaluation design, and suggestion 3 is mixed method analysis. So those that place number 2 at higher priority, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. And those that prioritize number 3, mixed methods analysis. Was that number 2, Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's do 2 more of these, but I think we've got the hang of it. Okay, so now we'll be comparing number 1 and number 4. So number 1 is connecting classrooms to international opportunities, and number 4 is qualitative evaluation. So please raise your hand if you would prioritize connecting classes to international opportunities. Thank you. And now please raise your hand if you prioritize qualitative evaluation. Was that number 4?
Number 4.
Okay, great. Let's do one more just for demonstration. So now we'll be comparing number 2 to 4. So number 2 is innovative evaluation design, and number 4 is qualitative evaluation. So please raise your hand if you find innovative evaluation design to be of higher priority. And, oh, thank you. And now if you find qualitative evaluation to be of higher priority. So I think that was number 2.
Yes.
Okay. So you can see here, thank you everybody for participating. You can see here how when you work through the whole table, by going through and adding up the responses, you reach what is essentially a list of priorities that are prioritized, so ranked. So even just from the brief exercise we did in comparing 1 through 4 to each other, so we didn't quite complete, it looks like 2 would likely be of higher priority. When there is a tie, which with longer lists happens less often, but if there is a tie, I like to go back and ask that question again and see how it's worked out. But I've also seen other resources that suggest that that warrants deeper conversation. So opening it back up for community discussion about why those are so close. And actually, you know, at some point, ranking, you know, the rankings, whether you're 3rd or 4th place for a certain topic, might not be of grand importance. So it may even be worth just noting that those were ranked kind of equally in a place. A few tips on this that I learned reading, but also the hard way in some cases. One suggestion here is oftentimes when we're filling a classroom for training, we kind of look for those community members that tend to huddle in the back and be very quiet. And we might tend to want to invite them to the front so that they can participate more. I think it depends on your audience, but one thing I found in Myanmar is that for this particular exercise, if the facilitator was at the front of the room and the board was at the front of the room, then it was actually ideal to have those that were maybe a bit more timid to be towards the back of the room, because, and this was communicated to me from my local partners, then they felt like they could raise their hand and contribute without others in the community necessarily seeing what they prioritize. So it seems like a simple exercise, but these are tools that are implemented with communities. And so really, it does take skilled facilitation to really look at the nuances of that community and ensure that by introducing these participatory tools, we're not, making certain individuals uncomfortable, and that really it is a representative group, and that the voices are being heard, or at least that we're kind of observing and recognizing those power differentials. So that was the priority matrix. Again, this would be done in local language and can be done with very few resources in the field. Are there any thoughts or questions on this particular tool? Okay. So I see we're still missing Dr. Dooley. Oh, and she had a lot to share. Okay, well, I was also with Dr. Dooley in Timor-Leste, and so I can speak to the use of PRA in Timor. And I think I saw some of our other, oh yeah, Olivia was also with us in Timor-Leste, so was Danette. Did I miss anybody? Katie may also be on the call. So there's a few of us on the call that were with Dr. Dooley and had the chance to use PRA techniques in farming communities in East Timor. And the techniques Dr. Dooley really wanted to speak about were transect walks. So transect walks allow the research practitioner to walk through a community with community members and to hear from those local voices a description of their community, kind of where the social and government resources are located, also to better understand, again, the social dynamics of a community. Sometimes as agriculturalists, we look first at the agricultural fields, but by doing a complete walk of the entire community, we're seeing where the feed and seed stores are located. We're learning how central religion is to certain communities, which we saw that definitely in Timor-Leste and also in my work in Myanmar and of course in Afghanistan. And so it's walking with the community and mapping out those community resources, or walking with them through their agricultural operations and mapping out the different crops that are produced at different times of the year. This can be used on a grander scale. You can begin to see, for example, things like access to education, how far certain neighborhoods have to travel to reach school or social services or healthcare. You can see kind of the socioeconomic divides within a community, and you can look at kind of access to infrastructure and services such as water and trash removal and things like that to really understand the community deeper. And actually in the tool list I provided, taking this further for participatory land use is extremely relevant in our field. And this is an area that's growing in resources. And so if that's kind of your area of work, this link here I found to be really interesting on participatory land use planning. For those of you that were in East Timor with us, anything else you'd like to say about Transect Walk? Or, we also conducted focus group discussions with the communities as well. And I would say, we learned, again, through the exercise that having mixed groups of men and women might have meant that women were less vocal. And then in the focus group that I helped to facilitate, Although it was only men, we found, of course, that the younger men were hesitant to participate. So it really took kind of an experienced facilitation to have all members of the focus group participate. Not sure, Danette or Olivia, anything else you would want to add since Dr. Dooley's not here to speak to these examples?
Sure, Dr. Byce. Oh, sorry, Danette. I was just going to say real quick that one of the things that really surprised me during this experience was how challenging translation could be. And I know it was very exhausting for our translators. And then just being more aware of how you communicate, speaking to the Timorese instead of speaking to the translator was one of the things that I noticed. So definitely something to take into consideration. And if you're going to be using specific jargon or research terminology, you may want to try to talk with your translator in advance to make sure those words will come across appropriately.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's an excellent observation. And actually, one of the recommendations we had for future kind of service projects is for those that haven't worked with translators before, that's a real skill to develop. So if we could include that in our pre-travel prep for students, I think that would be really helpful. Thank you. Danette, were you also had something to share?
That's kind of echoing what Olivia spoke, in that the opportunity to really just see the community from their eyes instead of our fresh eyes, because a lot of times on development projects, we come in with a specific objection and we're wanting to achieve our objection versus what they might need or what they may perceive in their own community.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And so Dr. Dooley, Dr. Edgar, and Ms. Katie Dobbins have actually published some of the results from this particular experience, I think last year, through AIAEE. So if you want to learn more, that's in our reference section also. Okay, and it looks like we have just enough time to try one more activity. So this is another way of prioritizing needs within a community with the community participating. Of course, we're going to use an online application. We probably wouldn't do this in most communities, although I have done it with NGOs in city centers in Myanmar before. So it really depends on your audience. So you can do this out in the field with stickers, Post-it notes, rocks, whatever resources you have. But because we are doing this virtually, I wanted to use an online tool called Mentimeter. So what we're going to do now is, as a group, taking those 6 topics that were recommended, and I'll go back to that screen in a minute, we're going to individually rank those depending on how interesting they are to you personally and how relevant they are to your work. So if you visit menti.com, MENTI.com, on your phone or computer, and then this is the activity code. And maybe if you don't mind giving me a thumbs up or a hand raise as y'all get there, so I can see that it's working. Okay, great, I see a few. Okay, I think I see the majority there. So one more second. Okay, and I'm going to go back to the list of topics. So they're listed here, 1 through 6. I'll read them out, but go ahead and you can start submitting your responses if you like. So 1 is connecting classes to international opportunities. 2 is innovative evaluation design. 3 is mixed method analysis techniques. 5 is adapting extension programming to climatic changes. And 6 is developing international partners. So as professional development topics, how important, oh, is that right?
I had a quick question.
Yes.
It shows under when you do your rankings that there's urgency and importance. Is it supposed to be relevant
Oh, no.
and interesting?
Yeah. It's supposed to be relevant and interesting. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Or I
just
guess it
didn't
would be
update it.
interesting and relevant. Okay. Just
Yeah.
double checking.
Sorry,
Thanks.
I didn't update it, but so we'll see. Some people may have responded to importance and urgency, but for demonstration purposes, hopefully it works. Okay, we'll take a couple more seconds. Oh, and I'll switch here and okay, I know you might still be working, but for demonstration purposes, let's look at kind of where things are falling, and this updates as you submit your responses. So ideally, this exercise would have kind of separated maybe the top 3 in this top right quadrant. But we see that these topics, or 5 topics, were ranked fairly important and fairly urgent, or if we had done interesting and relevant across the board. But with more items, doing this in a community and with the community kind of reaching consensus, what I found is you do see kind of topics separate from the pack, and then that helps with your prioritization. Because even just the word priority can translate interestingly in communities. And so something may be very important, but less urgent, or something may be seen as very urgent, but less important, or what other factors you're looking at. So that's an important, to me, disaggregation within, the community perspectives of what is needed. One limitation with is with that scale, you had no limit of, for example, you could respond of greatest importance and greatest urgency with each topic. And so it doesn't really account for limited resources. When you go back to the tools, again, this empowerment matrix is a tool I use a lot because it limits how many items each individual community member can rank as priority. And so it more realistically mimics the limited resources we have in a community. So I would suggest you look at that tool as well for prioritization within a community. Again, thank you, and especially thank you for trying this out in a virtual format. Dr. Dooley and I really had to work on how we could take some of these tools that are meant to be done at the village level, kind of on the ground, using rocks and sticks and things, and be able to practice them here in a virtual setting. And it's not just for this presentation. Actually, I was looking through DevX the other day. There are several organizations that are looking to adapt their participatory workshops and needs assessment manuals to be able to do some things at a distance through phone and where internet's available through the internet. So these questions we're having about how to adapt a professional development session for a Zoom meeting, implementers in the field are having those same questions. So I'll end with a few final thoughts. Obviously there are limitations to PRA, and so we like to suggest that it's used to help to triangulate information that's gathered through other sources. Also, the information that you learn is only as accurate as the participants are representative of the community, and so ensuring appropriate participants. So I've made mistakes in this area. For example, going to a rice farming community right at the time of harvest, you're probably not getting those most active in the farming community in your focus group, right? They're out in the fields. You're getting those that were at home, so not the appropriate audience. So really understanding the community, and that's where the local extension agents and community leaders can advise. Understanding power differentials. So at a minimum, we like to segregate men and women for most of these activities, but also looking at age and socioeconomic status and how can we form these groups that are most comfortable for feedback. And then it really does require skilled facilitation. And I am a real proponent of promoting local facilitation. So if any time I can be a guide and a mentor maybe to the local extension agents and researchers and allow them to facilitate and engage with the community, that's my first preference. And it helps on so many levels, including translation. So call to action. Dr. Dooley and I, wanted to share a few kind of action points. So one, consider PRA in your needs assessment planning and implementation. Also, and there was a publication, I think about 10 years ago now, in the journal of through AIAEE that really called for our field to train our graduate students that are going into international development and PRA techniques. And then let's continue to publish and present the PRA work that we are doing to advance the qualitative research methods in these fields and to learn from each other. And with that, I'm really happy that all of y'all joined and stuck with us through some of the technical issues. If you scan this QR code here or go to this link, which I can put in the comments section as well, this will take you to the Google Drive with this presentation, which has all of the embedded links as well as resources and our contact information if you'd like to reach out to Dr. Dooley or to me about the presentation or any opportunities for collaboration. With that, thank you, Dr. Bush. I'll hand it back to you, and or if there are questions from those that are on the call.